Hi there, everybody. I've no idea when you'll be listening to this podcast, but good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever that happens to be. I'm Dave Stalker, the president of EuropeActive. And today's topic is going under the theme of the Apple attack. That's in the most positive form of attack. It's more about the consumer digitalization and perhaps some confusion that comes out from that. This you may be listening to on a podcast, or you may be looking at it on a webcast, and I guess I'll apologize ahead for those who are having to sit and watch and look at me. But luckily my guest, Pete Croft, is a smarter, more handsome and dynamic gentleman than me, and I'm delighted that Pete is joining us. I've known Pete for years and years and years. Lots of stories that possibly couldn't be told on a podcast, but in terms of here, I'm introducing Pete. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Perfect Gym, one of the true industry experts in digital. So I'm just going to hand over to Pete to introduce himself. Hi, good morning, Pete.
Very great to see you as always. Pete Croft, Chief Strategy Officer at Perfect Gym right now. Been in the industry almost as long as Dave. About 30 years now, so it's 10 years running clubs, clubs that are now David Lloyd's and Nuffields and Virgins. Did a small chain and sold that, and then went into fitness equipment supply globally with the enterprise side of things for Life Fitness, and for the last 10 years have been on the digital side. That's been in wearables, it's been in wellness programs through corporate, and now it's also in member management solutions with Perfect Gym. So been around a little bit, Dave, as you well know.
Yeah, when we introduce ourselves, we sound as though we should be both there with Zimmer frames, just pipes sitting on a porch. But yeah, Pete, your experience is second to none. You've had some fantastic jobs and delivered some fantastic things for this industry. So it's a real, this is only our second podcast, and to have someone so early in the series with so much experience is fantastic. Last week we had the EHFF online, and the success of that, great event, and launched the strategy document, as you know, covering our 4 key areas being health, digital, community, and standards. I've just about got that down to memory now, which is something. And of course, the second one on that list, and they are in no particular order, and of course they're all linked as well, is digital, and the future, basically, of a digital council, which you will be involved with, strengthening the digital and tech community of our sector, and promote and expand the essential digital infrastructure for the fitness industry. And I think one of the key there is also knowledge. Everybody, as we know, jumped on the digital bandwagon, whether it was sticking up a camera and doing a class on Zoom, or professionally delivering it in a studio, or whatever it happens to be. Everybody saw an opportunity, and that is fantastic. And the opportunity with digital to be community delivery partners. But the other thing, of course, it has done has brought our industry firmly in front of enormous companies, Apple, Amazon, and we go out, and there's positives from that, and we'll see what happens. So give me sort of your view, Pete, as a way of an introduction, is how you feel the sort of happenings around digitalization in the fitness industry in the last months, sort of the rise of this sort of tech bubble in fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I like to frame it in a couple of ways. Firstly, you need to think about the human as the center of this. If you get confused by technology, just go back to the why, and that's the person, right? And we work in a very physical and emotional industry. So as a result of that, tech needs to fit. And I think that's probably why we found it quite difficult as an industry over time to really embrace it. But what's happened more recently during the COVID-19 period is digital transformation, consumer disruption, ultimately, has accelerated very, very quickly. This, for us as an industry, is ultimately a good thing, as long as we manage our way into that process. If we avoid it, then we will struggle with it, clearly. But consumer disruption is happening in every industry, in every part of the world, and everyone is party to that on a day-to-day basis. So it's inevitable that it happens to us, and ultimately, for me, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. The question is, how do we manage that? And I think when you look at some of the things that have happened, we've clearly seen a growth in content, whether that's our industry players like Wexer and Les Mills, or whether it's Apple, or whether it's Sky, for example. That content piece is growing, and we'll come back to that in a second, Dave, I know. We've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions, both in industry, so companies like TSG, buying up a lot of software companies. We've seen Mirror being bought by Lululemon, and we've seen those types of mergers and acquisitions happen for a while. We've seen a number of startups kicking off, and most interestingly, or most recently, we've seen some that really start to use the data. And that, for me, is a theme that we've got to keep coming back to as an industry. So companies like Keep Me and 4Global, Perfect Gym also uses data for a BI tool, for example. That is a key development that we're starting to see some fledgling industry players come forward. And then, of course, there's the more generic, how do we just improve the way we do business? How we coped with COVID-19, just changes to access control, changes to booking management, numbers of people in a facility, for example. So just the day-to-day stuff has also taken a shift. And then one of the key things I think we've seen is the app. So we've seen some of the big chains produce their own app, and it's a critical interface with the consumer. So it doesn't surprise me that ultimately that's where it will end up for the big guys. And we heard Humphrey the other day talking about very clearly, 50% of his users on the app are members. That means 50% aren't, and so he's also using his app to sell in the future, which is a really important statement from him. Especially when you think about a lot of new members are actually existing members of the past. We know that 24/7 in the past have taken on huge numbers of members from their existing databases. So that is a really important tweak that Humphrey highlighted on the webinar recently. So, lots of changes, live streaming, everyone having a bash at it, some doing a great job like David Lloyd, others having smaller community connections, which really comes back to one of your 4 pillars. So just lots going on, but just remember it's connected to the human, and I think it's easier to make sense of it.
Yeah, I think that is, such a massive point, that it is connected back to the human being, which is what our industry has always been about. But I think a lot of people are just daunted because we tend to be fitness people, and this is just an area that is, the papers are full of throwing out numbers which we just, frankly, are just lots of noughts to us. And actually, Humphrey had made the point. I don't think I'm wrong in quoting him as saying there's up to 100 people now on his payroll just dealing with their digital offering. That is enormous.
That is such an important point, Dave, because one of the other reasons that it's frightening is because we don't have tech people in our organizations. So fundamentally, we have to change that. We have to put people that understand how to implement, how to deliver tech solutions. And that's not a difficult thing to do. You just have to budget for a hire and get people in. The bigger guys are starting to do it. They're setting up teams of people. They know that they're becoming a digital company. So I think, for the smaller guys, we probably want to think about that at EuropeActive. How can we support that? How can we help educate? How can we help structure? What's the critical position you need to take? And then the last piece, of course, or the first piece, is your CEO has to have a vision. It has to be a digitally engaging vision, and then you'll make progress. And as long as you keep that in mind, with it's about the human, then I think your organizations start to make a lot of progress.
Yeah, I agree fully, and we've seen, you mentioned David Lloyd, obviously, Pure Gym, Basic Fit, and the others, GoFit. There's a huge amount of digitalization and planning and taking on these tech people in order to help in that world and understand our world and bring it together. So at that end of the spectrum, I think there will be a lot of ups and downs because people are going to get it wrong, and they need to react because there are much bigger players than them. In fact, bigger players than our industry coming into the market. But at the other end, as you mentioned, at the smaller end, I guess you're right. EuropeActive needs to look at that. I know that I've had a number of conversations, and at that smaller end, and I don't say this in a flippant way, but there's almost at some of those single operator sites and clubs, it's almost, we can't do it. How can we match Peloton? Just a non-understanding of the gap between nothing and Peloton is opportunity. So from EuropeActive's point of view, or from your point of view, in terms of that end of the market, the single site operators, smaller operators, what do you think is the sort of next steps for them of what we should be doing?
Yeah, great question. I think just one little statement about the big guys getting involved. The good thing about the Peloton and the Apples of this world is it's made it very clear, right? It's made it very clear. We can't compete with Apple content. We can't compete with Peloton content easily in our industry. So let's embrace it and let's work out what we can do and what we are good at. And that's around, focusing on our core. So what's our core? Our core is provision of a place, right? And the experience within that place, the products and solutions that we put there that people can't have at home or can't have anywhere else. And social, community, possibly advice, although that's taken a big shift towards generic content, which is now you just don't need to worry about as an operator. Yes, specificity, programs in terms of referral from doctors, absolutely, but not generic. So that focus on the core is fundamental. So my suggestion there for EuropeActive would be to say, right, well, how do we digitize the core? How do we embrace digital with our core offering as a facilities business, if that's where we're going to limit ourselves, and therefore what needs to be done? And that's things like helping CEOs understand, right? So it's education to senior leaders. How do I lead and get involved? It's education around hiring, around what's the right level of resource that you need in an operation to be successful. It's potentially even third-party resource, right? It's helping people get to things for a specific project, and then releasing that extra cost, if you like. And then it's the understanding. How do I pick as an operator what I want to be good at from this massive opportunity of digital, so that I can still be the brand I want to be and deliver the vision I want to be. And I think there's just some coaching pieces there that we could really do to help. Just take away the fog and make it easier to understand.
Yeah, I think absolutely take away the fog. I mean, ultimately, even in the multi-site operators, ultimately you need to be a community delivery partner. You as a club operator, nothing has changed. We know over the years and years and years they might have failed, but ultimately the most successful have been the community delivery partners. We both worked at one club, which is an enormous club at a point in our careers, which is one of the most successful clubs, I think, probably in the world. And its success, despite being a brilliant facility, was it was a community delivery partner. It was the hub of the community. And I think that continues. You just need to take this digital offering outside of the hub as well, and into that community, and make sure they're involved. And one of the worries that I kind of have with this is loads of the conversations that happened during the pandemic when everything was shut down is, what's your digital offering? What's on Zoom? What can we do here? And after this happens, what is going to be that live timetable, and we need to keep it going. Then everyone can go back, and suddenly they're just back. They're just back running clubs with all the challenges, and I'm not knocking them for that. But now they're busy cleaning and scrubbing and perhaps doing what should have been done before, but that doesn't matter. They're cleaning and scrubbing and all the rest of it, and they've cut their staff and they can't have any more people in, and they're trying to drive sales. And I worry particularly in the smaller groups that they have stopped on their digital strategy. And we don't know whether there's already local lockdowns, whether this all comes down. And I just think that you're right. You need entrepreneurial people to lead it forward and bring in the right people to help them to do it.
You make a really good point about being busy just operating. It is a tough industry. It's a great industry to be in, but it's very hard. It's often lower margin. It's high on people. It's dependent on selling all of the time. It's a tough industry. So going back with probably reduced staff, completely different operational procedures, yeah, puts a lot of pressure. And that really is the worry that I have about the new kind of onslaught from the consumer disruption from the likes of Apple and Sky and so on. Is, for me, that in itself is a huge opportunity, but it's accelerating digital transformation, which requires investment. And we're in a period of difficulty where investment is really hard. So yes, it's a threat, but it's not a threat because of competition. It's a threat because of our ability to embrace the opportunity because of cash, in my view. And I think maybe there's something else that EuropeActive could support on there, is to try and help keep this front of mind, keep moving things forward. So some of the thinking can be taken away, the decisions can be made just with lower investment levels.
Yeah, I mean, you bring us absolutely onto what was said at the beginning, and this is this sort of Apple moment, but you could put Amazon in there, you could put any number of people in there with global adverts, exciting products. I mean, there is just there is no doubt about that. And from somebody who has worked in trade associations quite a lot in my life, actually, when I think about that ability to impact at a government level on the health agenda, these people being involved is only a positive, because governments have to listen to them because they're very powerful. But we need them to be embracing the club experience, not just the consumer at home. Why be involved in your club when we can do the lot with us? What do you think are the positives that we should immediately look to embrace by these guys coming in? If you were back as an operator, what would your thought process be now with these guys entering the market?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing it allows us to do is really focus, right? It allows us to focus on the things that we're good at, that can't be delivered in a tech-based, online, high-content environment, right? So let's stop trying to do that unless we're big enough to do it. Let's stop trying to do that. Let's talk to people like Wexler and Les Mills, who are offering a hybrid version built specifically for our industry. Look at those guys. Look at Apple and say, well, actually, can I embrace this? So crazy idea, but part of the thing with Apple is you can work out with friends, right? So what if we actually provide a space where you can do that with the Apple content, in an oldest disused squash court, for example? So you're bringing people into this social environment, you're offering the facility, the experience, and you're embracing some of this change that is happening. It does mean you've got to think outside the box a bit, but it also means you can focus and really focus on delivering great experiences to populations that are very specific. So, we now have the opportunity, because data is there and is starting to happen, where we can really offer things specifically to certain populations. And we can understand what it is they want to do, what it is they like doing, what it is they repeat regular times, and be focused about delivering that, right? And that's important when you think about whether it's a low cost, young gym environment or a more mature gym environment. Being population specific allows you to say, well, actually, can my population do this at home? Have they even got space in their shared rented flat, right, in London or in Paris or whatever? So, starting to use the data is going to be critical, and understanding what aggregated data we can get from the likes of Amazon and Apple and Wexer, and this large volume of consumer information will help us be more population specific in delivering experiences. And ultimately, Dave, that is how we start to get to new populations that are somewhat like populations we've delivered to in the past, but different enough that we need to tweak and change and offer something else, and then bring in more members as a result. So the data really, and use of that data, is going to be what delivers us growth from the consumer disruption that comes from these guys.
Yeah, I think that, and of course we have now what we didn't have before, as you said, the data. it is there. And we have, we have delivery platforms and mechanisms and people who understand the industry as well, whether any which way, if I'm going to go and meet the CEO of one of the big chains, I'm going to meet them. If Amazon want to get in there, Jeff Bezos is not going to turn up and have a chat with them. I'm able to understand their problem and look and help to solve it, which goes back to your embrace the digital people within the industry and help them solve it. And actually listening to you there, it takes back to, we used to say, gosh, most people listening to this podcast won't remember, but you will remember Sandy Kaufman. And Sandy Kaufman always talked about those 20%ers, those people who use your facilities no matter what. And the challenge was embracing all the others. And that was where our attention dilemma always started, and fitness instructors talking to fit people and not the other people and not all the rest. Now we have the data and we have the skills and we have the professionals and we have e-reps and all the rest of it, along with digitalization, where we can get into that community and really work to deliver health differences through digital, through our facilities with professionals. And we need to, because that knowledge is our trump card, our ace in the sleeve to make this work.
It is the human design that we've spent decades understanding around activity is actually where the value lies for us. And finally, there's this data available on a mass scale that's allowing us to connect with new and different and specific populations, create very specific offerings. And at the end of the day, Apple, and I don't mean it like this, but Apple don't care about the end user, right? They are producing a fabulous tech-based ecosystem with great content, refreshing it regularly, great scale, absolutely top. What they don't do is necessarily take people on a journey to help them with their life and their activity and changing their activity, whether that's being super fit or whether it's being healthy and well. Whereas we have that opportunity, if we build our communities around that, we build our facility experiences around that, then I think ultimately, by using that data, creating BI, then we can build better and further growth into our existing industry. And that's where I get to the last point for you, Dave, sorry, about what can EuropeActive do. I think it can help show how that data can be used. I'm not saying that we have to aggregate it as a EuropeActive, but let's work out how to get to it. Let's work out what big data means for our industry, what AI means for our industry, and what we can learn from it and how we process that learning. I think that for EuropeActive would be a great project.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Pete, I know that we're kind of there with time, but your point, and I believe that digital council will sort of have the sort of foremost professionals, innovative group able there to look at exactly what you're talking about. And you said there, it's a journey, it's the community, it's understand, all these things. Community health delivery partners, understanding the journey, able to influence it all the way along the line, approaching this all positively. And when I look at those 4 pillars that I talked about, which are, as I said, health, digital, community, and standards, actually in health, there's the digital play, in community, there's a digital play, in standards and people, there's a digital play. It is all going to link through this. So it's exciting times. So we are just about there. I once again apologize for those who watch this and I've had to look at the screen for the whole time, but really fantastic as always. Pete, I know we could chat forever and often do about what's happening in the industry, but I'm going to leave the last word to you as opposed to me. So I'm going to say my bit and then hand back to you. So thanks to Peter, thanks to the audience. The next podcast is the 21st of October, 2020, but I'm just going to leave it with Pete to give us a final digital comment, which perhaps we can all leave and think about.
Well, as always, Dave, thanks for the invite and pleasure chatting to you. I've got so much more to say, as you know, and looking forward to spinning this up with EuropeActive to taking the council forwards. But so the one thing I would say, it's time to stop guessing. Let's use the data to know. Then all of this, worry and concern about whether we've got a business of the future will go away. And I know when you look at the body language of someone like Humphrey, you can see that he knows because he's looking at his data. So that's it from me. Stop guessing. Let's start to know and use the data.
Fantastic, simple message, and let's all crack on. Exciting times ahead. Thank you, and goodbye, everybody. Cheers.